The crystal chandeliers in the Fairview Hotel's ballroom cast rainbow prisms across white tablecloths, while Gregory Preston tapped his knife against his champagne flute. My hands trembled beneath the table as Tyler's father rose, his tuxedo crisp, his smile sharp as a blade. "A toast to the happy couple!" Gregory's voice boomed across the room. Servers paused with their silver trays. Aunt Jean stopped mid-bite into her chocolate mousse. Though I must say, planning this wedding would have been much easier if certain people were here to help. He paused, scanning the crowd. But at least Dean won't be rearranging our seating plan tonight. Laughter rippled through Tyler's side of the room. His mother Elaine's cackle pierced the air, her red designer dress a splash of blood against the white linens. Beside me, Mom's fingers twisted her napkin into a tight rope. Time stretched like pulled taffy. I stared at the centerpiece white roses and baby's breath arranged just so while my chest constricted, the room tilted sideways. Dad had spent hours arranging tables at the firefighters' ball each year, making sure elderly guests had clear paths to the restrooms, ensuring families with children sat near the exits. Tyler shifted in his chair, a nervous chuckle escaping his lips. His hand found mine under the table, a gentle squeeze that felt more like restraint than comfort. "Say something," I pleaded silently. "Stand up for him. For me." But Tyler just smiled that practiced smile, the one that appeared in all his family's Christmas cards. Perfect teeth, empty eyes. Across the room, my brother Alex's face flushed crimson. His wife Sophie gripped his forearm, whispering something in his ear. Other guests, those who remembered Dad pulling their children from car wrecks or racing into burning buildings while others ran out stared into their water glasses. My fingers found Dad's watch on my wrist, his last Father's Day gift to me. The metal was cool against my skin as I traced its familiar scratches. Always choose what's right, even if you have to walk alone. Gregory. My voice cut through the lingering chuckles, head swiveled toward me. "May I have the microphone?" He blinked, caught off guard by my calm tone. "Of course, sweetheart. The bride should have her say." The microphone felt heavy in my hand. I stood, my white rehearsal dinner dress suddenly too tight across my ribs. Mom's eyes met mine, worry creasing her forehead. "My father spent his life putting others first." The words emerged steady, clear. He rearranged those tables at the firefighters' ball so elderly guests wouldn't fall. He ran into burning buildings while others ran out. He gave a $25,000 loan to a family in need during the 2008 crisis. I paused, watching Gregory's smirk fade. "That family was yours." Elaine's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. The room fell silent except for the soft clink of silver against china. He never asked for recognition, never demanded repayment, never lorded it over anyone. My fingers worked at my engagement ring. Because that's not what good men do. The diamond caught the chandelier light as I placed it beside Tyler's plate. Anyone who would mock my father's memory doesn't deserve to be part of my life. I turned to Tyler, whose face had drained of color. And anyone who sits silently while it happens doesn't deserve to be part of my future. "Maddie," Tyler's whisper carried in the silence. "They're just joking around. Don't be so sensitive." A laugh bubbled up in my throat, sharp, bitter. "No, Tyler. For the first time, I'm seeing things clearly." My heels clicked against the marble floor as I walked toward the exit. Behind me, chairs scraped as people rose in confusion. Elaine's voice rang out. "Madison, don't be ridiculous. Come back here this instant." I pushed through the heavy doors into the lobby. The cool air hit my face like a splash of water. My hands shook as I pressed the elevator button, but my spine remained straight. 3 months of warning signs flashed through my mind. Tyler dismissing my teaching career over dinner. "You're not just going to be a high school teacher forever, right?" Elaine's backhanded compliments about our quaint family home. Gregory's constant name, dropping of their Seattle connections. The elevator doors opened. Tyler's voice echoed from the ballroom. "Maddie, wait." But I was done waiting, done hoping he'd change, done pretending his family's cruelty was acceptable. In my car, 10 minutes later, I gripped the steering wheel, Dad's firefighter badge swinging from the rearview mirror. Texts flooded my phone. "You're overreacting, Elaine." "It was just a harmless joke, Gregory." Please come back inside. We can fix this. Tyler? My thumb hovered over Tyler's message. 3 years ago, Dad had squeezed my hand in the hospital, his voice rough from the cancer eating his lungs. Remember, sweetheart, always choose what's right even if you have to walk alone. I wasn't alone. I had his memory, his strength, his example. I started the engine and drove away from the Fairview Hotel, leaving behind the crystal chandeliers, the fake laughter, and the man who wouldn't stand beside me when it mattered most. Some choices look like endings, but sometimes they're really beginnings in disguise. 20 minutes later at the bridal suite, the chandelier cast prisms across scattered wedding favor-stiny silver bells wrapped in white tulle. My hands trembled as I swept them into a box, each one chiming a bitter farewell. Mom stood in the doorway, her silver hair escaping its careful styling, while Alex paced the cream carpet like a caged lion. I should punch him. Alex's jaw clenched. Both of them. Alex. Mom's voice carried the weight of decades spent moderating Dad's righteous anger. The same tone she'd used when he'd wanted to confront the town council about cutting the fire department's budget. My phone buzzed again. Tyler's face lit up the screen, his Christmas card smile, perfect and empty. 27 missed calls, 43 text messages. I switched it to silent and dropped it in my purse. You don't have to be okay, Mom said, crossing to wrap her arms around me. The scent of her perfume-white shoulders, the same bottle Dad gave her every Valentine's Day, broke something loose inside my chest. The first tear fell, then another, until I couldn't stop them. Alex's footsteps stuttered to a halt. Through the blur, I watched him sink into the velvet armchair, his broad shoulders hunched like they'd been at Dad's funeral. He just sat there, I whispered into Mom's shoulder. While they laughed about Dad, a sob caught in my throat. My phone lit up again, this time with a text from Elaine. Darling, you're being dramatic. Gregory was just trying to lighten the mood. Your father would understand. A laugh bubbled up sharp, bitter. Dad would understand? Dad, who gave him $25,000 when Gregory's business was failing. I pulled back from Mom's embrace, swiping at my cheeks. Dad, who ran into their burning garage to save Gregory while he was passed out drunk inside. They've always been like this, Mom said, her fingers working at a loose thread on her sleeve. More concerned with appearances than... A knock at the door cut her off. Alex straightened, but Mom waved him back. Mrs. Barnes. The night manager's voice carried through the wood. Mr. Preston is asking to speak with Madison. Tell him she's unavailable. Mom's tone could have frozen Lake Superior. And please ensure my daughter's privacy is respected for the remainder of our stay. Of course, ma'am. My phone lit up with another message. This one from Tyler's cousin Rachel. Way to ruin everything because you can't take a joke. Tyler deserves better. The screen blurred as fresh tears welled up. Mom plucked the phone from my hands and switched it off. What do you need, sweetheart? The question caught in my chest. What did I need? Dad's voice in my ear telling me I'd done right. His strong hand squeezing my shoulder. The quiet pride in his eyes when I'd stood up to bullies in high school. I need to go home, I whispered. Alex grabbed my overnight bag while Mom gathered the scattered wedding favors. Neither mentioned the white dress hanging in the closet, its beading catching the light like morning frost. The drive home passed in silence, broken only by the soft ping of my mother's phone. She read each message with tightening lips. Caroline Phillips says we're being unreasonable. She reported, her voice flat. Apparently, I've raised a drama queen who can't appreciate Gregory's sense of humor. Alex's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Caroline Phillips, whose son Dad pulled out of that wrecked Mustang in '08. The same. Mom's laugh held no humor. Funny how people forget. But some didn't. As we pulled into our driveway, Mrs. Rodriguez from next door hurried over with a casserole dish. I heard what happened. She pressed the warm dish into my hands. Your father was a good man, the best. Her eyes flashed. Some people in this town need to learn respect. Inside, the house wrapped around us like a familiar blanket. Dad's boots still sat by the back door, caked with mud from his last fishing trip. His coffee mug, "World's Best Dad," in faded letters waited by the sink where he'd left it that final morning. I sank onto the couch, clutching one of Mom's throw pillows. What if I'm overreacting? What if... Stop. Alex knelt in front of me. You remember what Dad always said about bullies? How they count on people staying quiet. I nodded, throat tight. Gregory's a bully in an expensive suit. And Tyler. Alex's voice hardened. Tyler's worse, because he knows better, but he chose his side. Half an hour later, the doorbell rang. Through the front window, I caught a glimpse of Tyler's blue BMW. I'll handle this. Mom squared her shoulders the same way Dad used to before entering a burning building. I heard the door open. Tyler's voice practiced and polished. Mrs. Barnes, please. I know how it looked, but you have to understand my family. They can be difficult. I was just trying to keep the peace. The peace? Mom's voice could have cut glass. My husband saved your father's life. Loaned him money he never fully repaid, and you sat there while they mocked his memory. I'll talk to them. Make them apologize properly. Just let me see Madison. No, the word rang with finality. My daughter deserves someone who stands beside her, not behind her. Good night, Tyler. The door closed with a soft click. In the silence that followed, I felt Dad's presence in the family photos on the walls, in the worn springs of his favorite armchair, in the strength of Mom's spine as she turned away from the door. You want some tea, sweetheart? She asked, already moving toward the kitchen where Dad's kettle still sat on the back burner. I nodded, fingers finding his watch on my wrist. The metal was cool against my skin as I traced its familiar scratches. Always choose what's right, even if you have to walk alone. But sitting there, watching Mom measure out loose tea leaves while Alex grabbed Dad's cookie jar from the top shelf, I realized something. When you choose what's right, you might walk away from some people, but you walk toward others. The ones who matter, the ones who stay. Outside, Tyler's car started up, then faded into the distance. I closed my eyes and breathed in the scent of Mom's Earl Grey, letting it mingle with the phantom smell of Dad's aftershave that still clung to his chair. Some choices look like endings. But sometimes, they're really beginnings in disguise. At the present, their fluorescent lights of Riverview High hummed overhead as I arranged student essays on American transcendentalism into neat stacks. 2 weeks had passed since I'd walked away from the Fairview Hotel, leaving Tyler and his champagne-soaked mockery behind. My engagement ring now sat in a sealed envelope in my desk drawer, waiting for the right moment to return it. A knock echoed through my empty classroom. Principal Henderson stood in the doorway, his weathered face creased with concern. Madison, take all the time you need. Susan can cover your advanced placement classes through the month. I'm fine. The words came automatically, but my hands betrayed me, shuffling the same papers twice. Outside my window, maintenance crews cleared fallen leaves from the courtyard where Dad used to meet me after school, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate from the diner across the street. Right. Henderson nodded, unconvinced. Well, the fire department called. They'd like to know what to do with the wedding gifts that were sent there. My throat tightened. In the chaos after the rehearsal dinner, I'd forgotten about the gifts people had sent to Dad's old station. Captain Rivera had offered to collect them there, knowing how many of their regulars would want to contribute. Tell them to. A flash of red caught my eye through the window. Elaine Preston glided across the parking lot in another designer dress, her heels clicking against asphalt. My stomach clenched. I'll handle this, Henderson said, already moving to intercept her. But I said it was not necessary. 5 minutes later, Elaine breezed past him into my classroom, trailing expensive perfume. Madison, darling, this little drama has gone on long enough. Gregory meant no disrespect. We were just lightening the mood. I thought of Dad's last Father's Day card to me, tucked in my bedside drawer. Always choose what's right, even if you have to walk alone. The trembling in my hands stilled. The mood didn't need lightening, I said, voice steady. My father's memory didn't need mocking. Oh, please. Elaine waved her manicured fingers. Dean would have laughed. He never took himself so seriously. The stack of essays crinkled under my grip. You didn't know my father well enough to say what he would have found funny. I knew him better than you think. Her smile turned sharp. Who do you think arranged that loan in 2008? Gregory never would have accepted help from a firefighter otherwise. My mother's words from last night echoed in my head. Your father insisted they take the money. Said their kids shouldn't suffer for pride. That loan saved your family's home, I said. Dad refinanced our mortgage to help you. And we were very grateful. Elaine's nose wrinkled like she'd smelled something unpleasant. At the time, get out of my classroom. My voice could have frozen flame. Madison. Now, I stood, shoulders straight. And tell Gregory that mocking someone's kindness says far more about him than it ever could about my father. She retreated, heels stuttering on linoleum. In the doorway she paused. Tyler still loves you. He's just trying to keep the peace. Some things shouldn't be peaceful. I sat back down, turning to my work. Some things deserve our anger. After she left, Henderson reappeared with a cup of coffee and a cranberry muffin from the teacher's lounge. He set them on my desk without comment. The rest of the day passed in a blur of lesson plans and concerned glances from colleagues. But after the final bell, a soft knock pulled me from grading. Tyler's grandmother, Martha, stood in my doorway 30 minutes after the classes were over, her leather handbag clutched tight. Her eyes the same warm brown as Tyler's, but infinitely kinder, fixed on me. I brought something you should see. She pulled out a small box, fingers trembling slightly. I was there, you know, the day your father saved Gregory. My breath caught as she lifted the lid. Inside lay a photograph, edges worn soft with age. Dad stood beside a soot-stained Gregory, oxygen mask dangling around his neck. Both men smiled, Gregory's arms slung around Dad's shoulders. Gregory wrote the thank you note himself, Martha said, pulling out a yellowed paper. Said he'd never forget your father's kindness. I traced Dad's familiar features in the photo. What changed? Success. Martha's mouth twisted. Some people spend their whole lives running from gratitude. They think owing someone means being less than them. She pressed the box into my hands. You deserve someone who stands tall beside you, dear, not someone who shrinks to please others. After she left, I found Alex waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his truck. Brought you dinner. Mom said you've been skipping meals. We sat in the bed of his pickup, sharing chicken soup from thermoses while the sun set behind the football field. Students drifted past, nodding hellos. A few stopped to chat, sharing stories about their own losses, their own stands against unfairness. Remember when Dad used to bring his truck to the homecoming parade? Alex asked. Let all the kids climb up to see better? I smiled, remembering the pure joy on those small faces. He never cared about getting the seats dirty. Speaking of seats, Alex's voice turned careful. The diner banned Gregory and Elaine yesterday. Pete said anyone who mocks the man who saved his boy doesn't deserve his coffee. A burst of laughter escaped him, sharp but cleansing, like snow air. Pete's son had been trapped in a flipped car back in '05. Dad crawled inside, talking college football stats while he worked, keeping the boy calm until they could cut him free. The town remembers, Alex said softly. Yeah. I touched Dad's watch on my wrist. They do. The sun painted the school windows orange, reminding me of fire. But for the first time since the rehearsal dinner, the memory didn't hurt. Dad's voice echoed in my mind, strong and sure. Always choose what's right, even if you have to walk alone. I wasn't alone. I had his memory, his example, and a whole community of people who understood that some things were worth standing up for, even if it meant walking away from crystal chandeliers and champagne flutes that rang hollow. Mom was right. Grief changes shape, but it never truly leaves. We just build our lives around it, choosing each day whether to let it make us smaller or stronger. I was choosing stronger, just like Dad taught me. 2 weeks later, the spare bedroom looked exactly as I'd left it after high school graduation. Faded ballet shoes hung from a pink ribbon on the doorknob. Honor roll certificates yellowed behind glass frames. A collection of dog-eared Judy Blume paperbacks lined the top shelf, spines cracked from countless readings. Mom hadn't changed a thing, except to wash the bedding. The scent of lavender fabric softener wrapped around me as I sank onto the twin mattress. 3 cardboard boxes from my classroom sat unopened by the dresser, thank you notes from students, lesson plans, the framed photo of my debate team's victory at state finals. Principal Reynolds had barely blinked when I requested a leave of absence. "Take 6 months," she'd said, sliding the paperwork across her desk. "Your students will be here when you're ready." My fingers traced the brass handle of Dad's old steamer trunk, tucked beneath the window where morning sun warmed its weathered leather. Inside, his firefighter dress uniform lay carefully folded, metals gleaming against dark blue wool. But what caught my breath was tucked underneath his hiking boots, still caked with red dust from his last trip to Smith Rock. I lifted one boot, inhaling the familiar mix of leather and pine. How many trails had these boots carried him down? How many sunrises had he watched from mountaintops while the rest of us slept? The leather was butter-soft, shaped to his feet through countless miles. My phone buzzed. Tyler's name lit up the screen. "They've apologized in their own way. What more do you want?" The boots felt solid in my hands. Dad's voice echoed in memory. "Sometimes the trail you need to take isn't the one everyone else is walking." I set the phone face down and began sorting through the trunk. Each item held a story topographical maps with his careful annotations, a compass with his initials engraved on the back, a battered copy of Walks in the Pacific Northwest with dozens of highlighted passages. Between the pages, a folded sheet of notebook paper slipped out. Dad's distinctive slanted handwriting filled the page. Places to see someday. 1. Grand Canyon at sunrise. 2. Yellowstone's geysers. 3. Acadia's autumn colors. 4. Olympic rainforest. At the bottom, a note. Maybe when the mortgage is paid. My fingertip traced his handwriting until the letters blurred. He'd never made it to any of them. Always putting others first, helping neighbors with house payments, covering medical bills for rookie firefighters, sending us to college without debt. Mom appeared in the doorway, holding 2 steaming mugs. "I thought you might need this." She handed me chamomile tea in Dad's favorite fire department mug. Her eyes fell on the list in my lap. "Oh, honey, I remember when he wrote that." "Did he ever?" My voice caught. "No." She sat beside me, the bed creaking softly. "But he never complained, said watching you and Alex grow up was adventure enough." The tea warmed my hands as afternoon sun spilled through the window. Downstairs, the grandfather clock chimed 3 times. Its steady rhythm had marked every moment of my childhood homework sessions, Sunday dinners, late-night talks with Dad. Half an hour later, in the house, my laptop sat open on the desk, browsers still showing the email from Human Resources confirming my leave. Beyond it, a map of the United States hung on the wall, decorated with pushpins from family road trips. The empty southwest corner seemed to pulse with possibility. "Mom," I set down the mug, "what would you think if I took his boots for a walk?" She smiled, eyes crinkling just like Dad's used to. "He would have loved that." My fingers flew across the keyboard, booking a one-way ticket to Arizona. The confirmation email pinged as another text from Tyler lit up my phone. "We can start over. I've told them to apologize properly." But I was already planning my route through national parks, measuring distances between campgrounds, making lists of supplies. Dad's boots sat by the window, catching the late afternoon light. They'd need new laces, a good oiling, fresh insoles, but they were ready for trails he never got to walk. Mom squeezed my shoulder. "I'll help you pack." 3 weeks later, I stood at the south rim of the Grand Canyon, Dad's boots sturdy on my feet. Dawn painted the canyon walls in watercolor washes of pink and gold. A cool breeze carried the scent of sage and juniper. Far below, the Colorado River caught the first rays of sun, a silver ribbon winding through ancient stone. I pulled Dad's journal from my backpack, opening to a fresh page. The paper was crisp against my fingers as I wrote. "Dear Dad, you would have loved this sunrise. The light here changes every second, like nature's own fireworks show. There's a family of ravens nesting on the cliff edge. They remind me of you and your firefighter buddies, always watching out for everyone else. I kept your boots. Hope you don't mind that I'm breaking them in all over again. They remember the way to stand strong even on rough ground. Love. Maddie." At the bottom, I sketched a quick map of the trail ahead. Tomorrow, I'd start the descent into the canyon, following switchbacks down to the river. But for now, I sat on sun-warmed stone, letting peace settle into my bones like the layers of rock stretching endlessly below. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Tyler. I powered it off and slipped it deep into my pack. The ravens soared overhead, riding thermals with effortless grace. Sometimes the hardest step leads to the truest path. Dad taught me that, not in words, but in the way he lived one foot in front of the other, staying true to his course. I shouldered my backpack and faced the trail. Ahead lay Yellowstone's geysers, Acadia's maple forests, countless sunrise summits he never saw. But he was with me in every step, in the solid leather molded to my feet, in the strength of knowing exactly who I was and where I needed to go. Behind me, the sun climbed higher, warming my back like a gentle hand on my shoulder. The trail beckoned, leading down into the heart of the canyon. I took the first step, then another, finding my own rhythm in the steady drumbeat of boots against stone. Some people might call it running away, but with each mile, each new horizon, each star-filled night, I was running toward something bigger, toward the person Dad always knew I could be. His voice whispered in the wind, "The trail you need isn't always the easiest one." I whispered back, "I know, Dad, I know." And step by step, mile by mile, I walked into my own story. After the adventure was over, the morning sun painted golden stripes across my kitchen counter as I unpacked the last box from my travels. 6 months of wandering had left their mark not in souvenirs, but in the way my shoulders settled back, relaxed and sure. Mom leaned against the door frame, a steaming mug of Earl Grey warming her hands. "You look like yourself again," she said, her eyes crinkling. "More, even." I touched Dad's watch, its familiar weight anchoring me to the moment. The stack of mail on the counter caught my attention: bills, advertisements, and there, beneath a Williams-Sonoma catalog, a cream envelope with Tyler's precise handwriting. 6 months ago, that envelope would have sent my heart racing. Now, I slipped it into my desk drawer without opening it. Some answers could wait. The August heat shimmered off the pavement as I drove down Main Street, past familiar storefronts wearing new faces. Harrison's Hardware had repainted their awning. The old movie theater marquee advertised actual new releases instead of classic films. But Miller's Bookshop still displayed local authors in the window, and the crossing guard at 5th and Pine still wore those rattling bangles that had driven Dad crazy during the 4th of July parade. I pulled into the high school parking lot, muscle memory guiding me to my usual spot beneath the maple tree. Principal Roberts met me at the door, his handshake firm and warm. "Welcome back, Madison. Your classroom's ready whenever you are." The halls still smelled of floor wax and fresh paper, that peculiar August perfume unique to schools. My classroom door wore last year's construction paper letters, faded but holding on, "Miss Barnes' room where stories come alive." I'd barely finished arranging my travel photos on the bulletin board when a familiar voice sliced through the quiet. "Madison, you look rested. Will you be rejoining society soon?" Elaine Preston stood in my doorway, her designer handbag clutched like a shield. The local bookstore's paper bag dangled from her other hand, probably the latest book club selection she'd skim but never finish. 6 months ago, her presence would have knotted my stomach. Now, I smiled. Not the careful, strained smile I'd worn at countless country club dinners, but a real one that reached my eyes. "I never left society, Elaine. I just chose better company." She flinched as if I'd shouted, though my voice stayed quiet. Her heels clicked a retreat down the hallway, no clever comeback following in her wake. The sound of her departure felt like punctuation, the period at the end of a chapter I'd finally finished reading. That evening, I drove to Riverside Cemetery, where the setting sun turned the headstones to amber. Dad's grave looked well-tended, fresh flowers brightening the bronze marker. From my backpack, I pulled out 7 smooth stones sewn from each national park I'd visited. "I walked alone, Dad, just like you said." My voice carried in the evening stillness, but I never felt lonely. Something white caught my eye, a note tucked beneath a bouquet of fresh lilies. I recognized Gregory's angular handwriting. "Your father was a better man than I acknowledged." The words blurred as unexpected tears welled up. Not tears of forgiveness, some bridges stay crossed, but acknowledgement of a truth I'd known all along. Dad's legacy lived in actions, not accolades. Back in my classroom the next morning, students filtered in as I finished hanging the last photo: sunset at the Grand Canyon, the sky ablaze with colors Dad would have loved. Jessica Martinez paused by my desk, her eyes tracing the pictures. "My grandpa was on the force with your dad," she said. "He always said Mr. Barnes taught him that courage isn't about fighting, it's about knowing what deserves defending." "That sounds like him." I straightened a frame showing Half Dome at dawn. He believed the hardest choices show us who we really are. The new American literature teacher stuck his head in during lunch. Mark Anderson transferred from Seattle, bringing fresh perspectives and zero connection to local drama. His genuine interest in my Grand Canyon photos sparked an hour of trading travel stories. No rush, no pressure, just the simple pleasure of sharing experiences with someone who listened to understand, not to respond. That weekend, Mom and I sorted through Dad's old fishing gear in the garage. She held up his favorite tackle box, its red paint worn from years of early morning lake trips. "Your father would be proud of both of us," she said, polishing the brass latch. "Starting over isn't easy, but it's better than standing still." I nodded, remembering the weight I'd carried before walking away. Some loads look heavier when you put them down. Later that night, Tyler's letter finally found its way out of my desk drawer. His familiar handwriting filled the page with what looked like genuine self-reflection. I should have stood up for what was right. Fear of disappointing my parents made me disappoint myself instead. My response took 4 sentences, written on a postcard showing the Oregon coast at sunset. "I hope you find the courage to be your own person. Some choices look like endings but lead us home to ourselves. Thank you for teaching me that compromise has limits. Be well, Tyler." The ring went back through proper channels to his grandmother, who'd always seemed clearest. The gossip faded like autumn leaves, swept away by newer storms and other lives. In the end, the drama that had consumed my world for months barely rippled the surface of our small town's ongoing story. Standing in my classroom that Friday afternoon, I watched students spill out into the sunshine, their laughter carrying through open windows. On my desk, a stack of college recommendations waited for signatures, each one a chance to help someone else find their path. Dad's watch kept steady time against my wrist, its rhythm matching my heartbeat constant, sure, alive with possibility. Some say the best revenge is living well, but this wasn't revenge, it was resurrection. Every step forward honored not just Dad's memory, but the truth he lived by, that integrity isn't a destination but a daily choice. In walking away, I'd found my way home to myself. The late summer light streamed through my classroom windows, catching the dust motes like falling stars. On my bulletin board, the Grand Canyon sunset blazed next to Half Dome's silver face, while Dad's words echoed in my mind. "Always choose what's right, even if you have to walk alone." But I wasn't alone. I was exactly where I needed to be. The following spring, the crystal chandeliers in Riverview High's auditorium cast familiar rainbow prisms across the polished floor. My fingers traced Dad's watch as I stood before the school board, my proposal folder neat on the podium. 7 faces watched me, including Mr. Henderson, whose daughter Dad had pulled from that overturned car during the ice storm of '08. The Dean Barnes Memorial Scholarship. I began, my voice steady, "Will recognize students who demonstrate moral courage and community service, because that's what my father taught us matters most." Principal Matthews leaned forward, her reading glasses catching the light. "And the funding source?" I opened the leather-bound book beside me. "Paths My Father Would Have Loved," a collection of photographs from the national parks he dreamed of visiting. My throat tightened around the words. "The pre-orders alone will fund the first year." The vote was unanimous. Mr. Henderson's "aye" came with misty eyes and a slight nod. Walking to my car afterward, I paused to watch the sunset paint the mountains Dad had loved. The same peaks where he'd taught me to climb, his calloused hands showing me where to grip the rock. A text buzzed in my pocket, Mom sending a photo from the cancer center where she now volunteered. She stood beside a wall of quilts sewn by survivors, her smile genuine despite the shadows of memory in her eyes. The annual Firefighters Benefit Dinner transformed the community center 2 weeks later. Red and white tablecloths replaced the usual folding tables. A fresh-faced rookie held the door as I entered, nervously straightening his dress blues. "Miss Barnes?" His Adam's apple bobbed. "Chief asked if you'd say a few words?" I nodded, remembering Dad's first time speaking here. He'd gripped the podium so hard his knuckles went white, but his words about service and sacrifice had brought the room to its feet. The crowd parted as I walked to the front. Gregory and Elaine's usual tables sat empty. They'd stopped attending most community events. But in the back corner, Tyler stood quietly with his grandmother. When our eyes met, he offered a small nod. No dramatic gestures, no attempts to rewrite the past, just acknowledgement of the path forward we'd each chosen. My father believed wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts, I told the gathered faces. He measured it in lives touched, hands held, burdens shared. The words flowed easily now, shaped by 12 months of learning to stand alone. That's the legacy worth protecting. The sunlight streamed through my classroom windows a few days later. Jenny Martinez sat in the front row, tears tracking down her cheeks as she described finding her mother's cancer diagnosis paperwork. It doesn't get smaller, I said softly, remembering the weight of those same fears. But you grow around it. Your heart makes room for both the grief and the grace. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Did you ever stop being scared? No, but I learned to be brave anyway. Like the characters in the books we read, carrying on despite the fear, not an absence of it. The final bell rang through the halls. As my students filed out, I noticed the envelope on my desk. Inside lay an invitation to Sophie and Alex's wedding, planned for the park Dad had helped build. The same park where he'd taught us to ride bikes, where he grilled burgers for the entire neighborhood after the Miller House fire. That evening, I settled onto my front porch with Dad's old photo album and a mug of chamomile tea. A letter from Tyler's grandmother peeked from between the pages. You helped my grandson find his voice. He's taking a job in Seattle, away from his parents' influence for the first time. Some courage comes quietly, but it comes. The scent of blooming lilacs drifted from Mom's garden next door. Dad had planted them the spring before his diagnosis, saying flowers were hope made visible. I turned to a fresh page in my journal, adding today's small victories to the growing collection. Tomorrow I'd meet Jessica Chen, the first recipient of Dad's scholarship. Her single mother worked 3 jobs to keep their small apartment. But Jessica spent weekends at the senior center, reading to residents who reminded her of the grandmother she'd lost. Character isn't what you have, Dad always said. It's what you give. The sunset painted the hills in shades of amber and rose. From my porch, I could see the ridge where Dad had proposed to Mom 30 years ago. The town spread below, porch lights winking on one by one like earthbound stars. His voice echoed in memory. Always choose what's right, even if you have to walk alone. But I wasn't alone. I was surrounded by the legacy he built, not in monuments or buildings, but in lives changed and courage kindled, in stories of ordinary heroes doing extraordinary things, in children learning that integrity matters more than influence. The evening breeze carried the scent of wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. Somewhere, a screen door creaked, followed by the quiet murmur of voices sharing the day's stories. This was wealth that couldn't be counted or claimed, only lived and passed on. I closed the album and stood, watching the first stars emerge. Dad's firefighter badge still hung from my rearview mirror, no longer a weight of grief but a compass pointing true north. Some choices look like endings when you make them, but sometimes, if you're brave enough to walk through the darkness, they lead you exactly where you need to be. The moon rose over the mountains, full and bright, and in its light I saw the path ahead with perfect clarity, not a lonely road but a legacy of light.